Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, today I want to talk about something we've all felt but rarely speak about. The words that wounded us deeper than any blade. They say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But that's a lie we've told ourselves to survive. Some words become poison. They echo in our heads, rewriting the way we see ourselves, turning confidence into doubt, dreams into dust. I've heard the quotes that broke me. You're not enough. You'll never make it. Why even try? But here's what I learned. Poison only works if you swallow it. Today, I'm going to share how to spit it out, cleanse your heart, and rewrite the quotes that once shattered you into words that will set you free. Recognizing the hidden damage of negative words begins with understanding that words are not just harmless sounds or letters on a page. They are carriers of meaning, emotion, and influence. From the moment we are born, the words spoken to us begin shaping our perception of the world and ourselves. When someone tells a child, "You can't do that," the phrase might seem small or even protective, but over time, repeated phrases like this can become invisible chains that limit the way that person sees their own potential. The human mind tends to remember negative experiences more vividly than positive ones, a phenomenon known as negativity bias, and words are no exception. They linger, replaying themselves in quiet moments, slowly embedding into the subconscious, influencing decisions, and even dictating how one reacts to challenges. The most dangerous aspect of harmful words is their subtlety. Unlike a physical injury, there is no visible wound to treat, no immediate sign that something is wrong. The damage happens internally, quietly, as self-esteem is eroded little by little. People often dismiss the impact of verbal harm, assuming that if there's no physical bruise, there's no lasting effect. But this is far from true. Words can alter neural pathways, affecting how someone processes self-worth. Over time, they can shift a person's identity, replacing confidence with self-doubt, replacing courage with fear, and replacing hope with resignation. This damage often comes disguised as advice, jokes, or harmless remarks. A teacher might sarcastically say, "Well, you're not exactly the brightest in the class," thinking it's a motivator, but the student hears a confirmation of their worst fears. A friend might say, "You're too sensitive," after a heartfelt moment, unintentionally teaching you to suppress emotions. Even well-meaning parents, in moments of frustration, can speak words that echo for decades. These phrases embed themselves like seeds in the soil of the mind, and with enough repetition and reinforcement, they grow into self-limiting beliefs that choke out ambition and joy. What makes the damage so hidden is that we often accept these words as truth without ever questioning them. When the same messages are repeated over and over by authority figures, peers, or even ourselves, they become part of our internal narrative. This internal voice is powerful. It dictates how we handle failure, how we approach opportunity, and how we see our own worth. Negative words create mental filters, making us interpret new experiences through the lens of past criticisms. Someone who's been told they are bad at relationships might enter new ones already expecting failure. Someone who's been called lazy might hesitate to start new projects for fear they'll live up to the label. This hidden damage also has a way of multiplying because of the human tendency to repeat to ourselves what we've been told. A single hurtful comment can be replayed in the mind 1,000 times, magnifying its impact. It's like having a recording on loop that reinforces the same hurt over and over until it feels like an undeniable fact. This internal repetition makes the original words more dangerous than they first seemed, because now the enemy isn't just the voice that spoke them, it's also our own voice agreeing with them. Many people underestimate how much of their present struggles are rooted in past words. When someone feels constant anxiety in social settings, it might trace back to a time they were mocked for speaking up. When someone avoids taking leadership roles, it might be because years ago they were told they weren't cut out for it. These early messages create mental roadblocks that prevent people from seeing opportunities clearly. Worse, they can make someone reject praise or success when it finally comes, because it feels inconsistent with the story they've been told about themselves. The hidden nature of this damage also means that it can continue for years unnoticed. People adapt to it, building coping mechanisms that hide the deeper problem. They might become perfectionists to counteract the feeling of not being good enough. They might overwork to prove their worth, or underachieve to avoid the risk of failure. These patterns are often misunderstood as personality traits, when in reality, they are defense mechanisms born from poisonous words. The long-term effects can even be physical. Chronic stress from negative self-talk has been linked to issues like fatigue, insomnia, and weakened immunity. The mind and body are deeply connected, and the stress of carrying unchallenged harmful words can manifest in health problems. This is why recognizing the hidden damage is so important. It's not just about emotional well-being. It's about reclaiming one's entire quality of life. Awareness is the first step. We can't heal what we can't see, and we can't challenge a lie if we've mistaken it for truth. Sometimes, simply pausing to reflect on where a belief about ourselves originated can reveal how much it's been shaped by the words of others. Asking, who told me this? And why did I believe them? Can open the door to understanding. The danger lies in assuming that hurtful words are harmless just because they were spoken long ago. In reality, time does not erase their impact. It only hides it under layers of routine and habit. By bringing these hidden wounds into the light, we start to see the true cost of letting them remain unchallenged. And in that moment of recognition, the possibility for change begins to grow. Identifying the sources of poisonous quotes in life requires looking closely at where the most damaging words originate and why they have the power to stay with us. These sources are not always obvious, and sometimes the ones who hurt us the most are the very people we trust the most. Family is often one of the first places where these damaging quotes take root. Parents, siblings, or relatives may say things in moments of anger, frustration, or even misguided care that end up becoming part of our internal vocabulary. A parent might call a child useless when they fail at a task, not realizing that such a label will be replayed in the child's mind for years. Even affectionate nicknames can sometimes carry unintended harm when they highlight a perceived weakness, physical feature, or limitation. Because these words come from people we are supposed to trust and feel safe with, they carry extra weight and authority, making them more likely to become part of our self-image. Another significant source is school, teachers, classmates, and the overall academic environment can leave deep verbal scars. A teacher's dismissive comment about one's intelligence can be enough to plant the idea that learning isn't for you. Classmates can use ridicule, gossip, or teasing as weapons, targeting everything from appearance to abilities. Since school is a formative environment where identity and confidence are still being shaped, the words spoken there can create long-lasting narratives. The social pressure to fit in amplifies the power of these quotes, because when many voices echo the same insult or label, it feels like truth rather than opinion. Workplaces are another breeding ground for poisonous quotes. In competitive or toxic work environments, criticism is sometimes delivered in ways that aim to belittle rather than improve. A boss telling an employee they are replaceable can diminish their sense of value. Colleagues might make sarcastic remarks about someone's skills or ambition, turning them into running jokes. Since our careers are tied to our sense of achievement and stability, harmful words in professional settings can shake our confidence, making us question our competence and worth. Friendships, too, are not immune to producing damaging words. Friends often gain deep insight into our insecurities, and while some may protect those vulnerabilities, others might exploit them, whether intentionally or unintentionally. A friend saying, "You're always so dramatic," or "No one takes you seriously," may be meant as casual teasing. But when such remarks are repeated over time, they reinforce a negative image of ourselves. Because friendships are built on emotional connection, the betrayal of hearing hurtful words from someone close can make them even more impactful. Media and social platforms are a more modern but equally powerful source. In today's digital age, a single hurtful comment on a post can linger far longer than we expect. Social media algorithms push repeated exposure to opinions and criticism, sometimes from strangers who know nothing about us personally, but whose words still sting. Comparison culture magnifies insecurities, and when we encounter repeated negative messages about beauty, success, or worthiness, they can become as ingrained as anything said face to face. What makes media quotes so dangerous is their reach and repetition. Harmful ideas are presented not just as opinions, but as societal norms, making them harder to challenge. Even our own minds can be a source of poisonous quotes. Sometimes we internalize criticism so deeply that we begin to speak it to ourselves without realizing it originated elsewhere. This internal dialogue can be harsher than anything anyone else could say because it's constant and intimately tied to our emotions. A single comment made years ago can evolve into a self-imposed self-imposed mantra that shapes every decision. We tell ourselves, "I'm not good enough," or "I always mess things up," forgetting where that belief first came from, and over time, these self-directed words feel like unquestionable truths. Cultural and societal expectations can also plant damaging quotes. In certain cultures, strict definitions of success, beauty, or behavior are drilled into individuals from an early age. Phrases like "real men don't cry" or "a good woman should always" may be repeated so often that they feel like universal truths rather than opinions shaped by tradition. These kinds of sayings can box people into roles that suffocate their individuality, forcing them to suppress parts of themselves just to avoid judgment or rejection. Religious or community circles, while often meant to inspire, can sometimes be sources of unintended harm as well. Interpretations of beliefs can be twisted into controlling language, telling someone they are not faithful enough, not pure enough, or not worthy, can cause deep emotional and spiritual damage. Because these statements are often framed as moral truths, they can be the hardest to challenge, especially if the individual fears rejection from their community. One of the most complex aspects of identifying these sources is that the people delivering poisonous quotes are not always acting out of malice. Many harmful words are spoken in moments of ignorance, frustration, or misplaced concern. A parent who tells their child to be realistic about a dream may believe they are protecting them from disappointment. A teacher who harshly critiques a student's work may believe they are preparing them for a competitive world. Yet, regardless of intent, the impact can still be damaging, and without awareness, those words can stay buried, influencing choices long after the speaker has forgotten saying them. Recognizing these sources means paying attention not just to what was said, but also to who said it, when it was said, and why it mattered so much. It involves connecting the dots between past comments and current beliefs. When we can pinpoint where these poisonous quotes originated, we take the first step towards separating someone else's opinion from our own truth. This process is often uncomfortable because it may mean admitting that people we love or respect have hurt us. It may mean confronting long-held cultural norms or stepping away from relationships that continue to feed us toxic language. But until these sources are identified, the poisonous words remain rooted in the subconscious, silently shaping the way we see ourselves and the way we live our lives. Understanding how repeated words shape self-belief begins with realizing that the mind works like fertile soil. Whatever is planted in it and watered regularly will grow, whether it is truth or lies. When words are spoken to us repeatedly, especially during our most impressionable years, they begin to form the foundation of how we view ourselves. The brain is constantly seeking patterns, and when it hears the same message again and again, it accepts it as reality. This is why repeated words, even if they are false, can feel truer than actual facts. The subconscious mind does not filter out lies. It absorbs what it hears most often and uses that information to create our internal narrative. The repetition of negative words works much like erosion. It is rarely a single statement that does the most damage, but rather the steady drip of criticism over time. A child who hears, "You're clumsy," every time they spill something will eventually internalize that identity, even in areas of life that have nothing to do with coordination. This identity becomes self-fulfilling. Believing you are clumsy makes you move with hesitation, which increases the likelihood of mistakes, reinforcing the original label. In this way, words don't just describe reality, they can actively shape it. Positive repetition works in the same way, but with the opposite effect. Someone who is constantly told they are capable and intelligent begins to approach challenges with more confidence. This is why encouragement from parents, teachers, and mentors can have lifelong benefits. But while positive words can lift us, negative words have a stronger and faster impact because the human brain is wired to pay more attention to threats and dangers than to comfort. This survival mechanism, while useful for physical safety, becomes harmful when applied to verbal experiences, making criticism sink deeper than praise. When repeated words come from authority figures, their impact is amplified. The human brain gives more weight to statements from people we believe know more than we do. Parents, teachers, coaches, managers, spiritual leaders. This is why the same phrase spoken by a stranger may be shrugged off, but when spoken by someone whose opinion matters deeply to us, it becomes a defining truth. Once this truth takes root, it can influence how we set goals, how we react to setbacks, and whether we even try in the first place. Over time, repeated words begin to merge into our self-talk. We might think we are simply being realistic with ourselves, but in reality, we are echoing someone else's voice. A person told for years that they don't have leadership qualities may find themselves hesitating to take charge, not because they lack skill, but because the repeated phrase has become a mental roadblock. The danger of this process is that once the words are internalized, they no longer require an external speaker. We start to reinforce them ourselves, often without realizing it. The cycle of belief shaped by repetition is further strengthened by selective perception. Once we believe something about ourselves, we tend to notice and remember events that confirm it while ignoring those that contradict it. If we believe we are bad with money because of repeated comments, we will notice every mistake we make with finances and overlook the times we handle money well. This confirmation bias cements the belief even more, making it harder to challenge. The tone and delivery of repeated words also matter. Words spoken in anger, sarcasm, or mockery tend to stick more stubbornly because they are tied to strong emotions. Emotional intensity acts like glue, making memories harder to erase. That is why a single hurtful statement shouted in rage can be remembered years later in vivid detail, while dozens of calm reassurances may fade into the background. When hurtful words are delivered both repeatedly and with emotional force, they become some of the hardest to uproot. The environment in which we live can either reinforce or weaken the impact of these repeated words. If the same negative message is echoed across multiple areas of life. Home, school, work. It becomes even more ingrained. A person who hears, "You're lazy," from family, classmates, and co-workers will have a much harder time rejecting that label than someone who hears it in only one setting. This consistency across environments tricks the mind into believing the message must be universally true. Technology and media have added another layer to this problem. Repeated exposure to certain societal messages about appearance, success, or worth can shape self-belief even if no one in our personal life says them directly. Ads, movies, and social media posts often repeat subtle or overt ideas about what makes a person valuable. Seeing these messages hundreds of times reinforces them just as much as hearing them from people around us. Breaking free from the influence of repeated words requires becoming aware of them in the first place. Many people carry beliefs about themselves without ever questioning where they came from or whether they are accurate. The challenge is that these beliefs feel natural and self-evident because they have been repeated so many times. Recognizing that a thought like, "I'm not creative," or "I'm not lovable," might not be an absolute truth, but rather a product of repeated conditioning, can be the first step toward change. It is not an easy process because repetition has had years to build its hold, and undoing it requires persistence. Yet understanding that the self-image we carry today might have been shaped more by repetition than by reality opens the possibility of reshaping it with new, empowering words that can replace the old ones. Choosing to reject and replace toxic narratives starts with realizing that we are not obligated to believe every word that has ever been spoken over us. Many people go through life carrying labels and judgments that were handed to them without consent, allowing them to shape decisions, relationships, and self-worth. The truth is, we have the power to refuse these narratives, but that power can only be exercised when we first become aware of what we have accepted as truth. This means pausing to examine the stories we tell ourselves and asking whether they actually reflect who we are or if they were planted in us by others. Toxic narratives are often deeply ingrained because they have been repeated for years and sometimes even masquerade as reality. A person might believe, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll never be successful," because it feels like an established fact, not realizing it is simply a conclusion drawn from someone else's harmful opinion. Rejecting such narratives requires a conscious choice to stop giving them authority. This choice can feel uncomfortable, especially when the words came from people we loved or respected. Walking away from these beliefs can feel like betraying a part of our past, but in reality, it is an act of reclaiming our identity. Part of this process involves identifying the exact phrases or ideas that have been holding us back. Vague feelings of inadequacy are harder to challenge than specific statements when we can clearly articulate the toxic narrative. "I'm too shy to lead." "I don't have what it takes to start a business." "I'm not attractive enough for love." We can begin to see it for what it is, a mental script that can be rewritten. Writing these narratives down and tracing their origins can help us recognize that they are not absolute truths, but learned beliefs. Rejecting these narratives is not about pretending the words were never spoken or that they didn't hurt. It's about stripping them of their power in the present. One way to do this is by consciously refusing to repeat them in our own self-talk. Every time we catch ourselves echoing an old insult or limitation, we have the opportunity to interrupt the thought and replace it with something truer and more empowering. This is not about blind optimism or empty affirmations. It is about choosing words that are rooted in our real strengths, experiences, and potential. Replacing toxic narratives works best when it's intentional and consistent. The human brain thrives on repetition, which means that just as harmful words can become ingrained through constant exposure, positive and empowering words can do the same. If someone has lived under the belief, "I am unworthy," replacing it with "I am enough as I am," needs to be repeated regularly until the new belief begins to take root. This requires patience, because the old narratives will try to resurface, especially in moments of stress or failure. But with persistence, the balance begins to shift and the new words start to feel more natural than the old ones. It's also important to surround ourselves with voices that reinforce the new narrative. This might mean spending more time with encouraging friends, seeking mentors who see our potential, or immersing ourselves in books, speeches, and environments that align with the truth we want to live. The more we expose ourselves to affirming voices, the more difficult it becomes for toxic narratives to regain control. Conversely, this may require reducing contact with people or situations that continually feed the old beliefs. This can be challenging, especially when those sources are close family members or long-time friends. But sometimes distance is necessary for growth. Challenging toxic narratives also involves collecting evidence that disproves them. Our minds are more likely to believe new ideas when they are supported by real life examples. If the old belief says, "You always fail," intentionally remembering and documenting times when we succeeded, no matter how small, begins to weaken the old narrative. If the toxic phrase was, "You're not smart enough," listing past achievements or skills learned serves as proof that the belief is false. Over time, this evidence becomes a powerful counter-argument to the old, damaging script. Another important aspect is reframing past experiences. Many toxic narratives are born from moments of failure, rejection, or criticism. By looking at these events from a different perspective, seeing them as lessons rather than final verdicts, we reduce the emotional hold they have over us. This reframing process helps us understand that one moment in the past does not have the authority to define our entire future. In some cases, professional help can be invaluable in this process. Counselors, coaches, or therapists can guide us in identifying harmful patterns and equipping us with tools to replace them. They can also provide a neutral perspective, helping us see how much of our self-image has been shaped by others rather than by our own truth. Having a safe space to speak the toxic narratives out loud without judgment can be the first time we hear how untrue and damaging they really are. Ultimately, rejecting and replacing toxic narratives is a deliberate act of self-liberation. It is deciding that we no longer want to live according to someone else's limited vision of who we can be. It is understanding that the words we accept become the life we experience, and that we have the authority to change that story. This process doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens in countless small decisions to choose truth over lies, to choose growth over fear, and to choose self-respect over self-doubt, building resilience through empowering self-talk begins with recognizing that the voice we hear most in life is our own. Every day, we have an ongoing conversation with ourselves, whether we are conscious of it or not. This internal dialogue shapes how we see challenges, how we handle setbacks, and how we interpret the events in our lives. If that voice is filled with criticism, doubt, and fear, it can become a barrier to progress. But when that voice is intentional, supportive, and rooted in truth, it becomes one of the most powerful tools for resilience. Resilience is not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to adapt and move forward despite it. And the way we talk to ourselves directly affects that ability. Empowering self-talk is more than just repeating positive phrases. It is about crafting language that reinforces our strengths and our ability to overcome challenges. It means catching the moments when our inner dialogue turns harsh and choosing to redirect it in a way that fuels persistence rather than defeat. When a mistake happens, an untrained inner voice might say, "I always mess things up." But a resilient inner voice reframes it to, "I didn't get it right this time, but I can learn from this and try again." That shift in language is small but critical. It moves the focus from permanent failure to temporary challenge, which keeps motivation alive. Resilience grows when we consistently choose words that focus on what can be done rather than on what is wrong. Life will always present difficulties, but when our self-talk is anchored in possibility and solutions, we are more likely to take action rather than give in to hopelessness. For example, instead of thinking, "This is impossible," shifting to, "This is hard, but I can figure it out," opens the door to creative problem solving. Empowering self-talk trains the brain to see opportunity even in obstacles, which is the essence of resilience. The impact of self-talk is not only mental but also physical. Studies have shown that positive and empowering language can reduce stress responses in the body, lower cortisol levels, and improve focus. This means that the words we choose in our internal dialogue can directly affect our energy levels, our ability to think clearly, and our capacity to recover from setbacks. When faced with adversity, a calm and encouraging inner voice helps keep emotions in check, allowing us to make better decisions under pressure. Building this kind of self-talk requires practice because for many people, the default inner voice has been shaped by years of criticism, both external and internal. The first step is becoming aware of the tone and content of our self-talk. Paying attention to the words we use when speaking to ourselves reveals patterns we might not have noticed before. Are we using absolute statements like always and never that reinforce a sense of helplessness? Are we labeling ourselves in ways that box us into limitations? Awareness allows us to interrupt these patterns and replace them with words that give us room to grow. Replacing negative self-talk with empowering language works best when the new words are believable. Simply saying, "I'm amazing," when we don't believe, it may feel hollow, but saying, "I am capable of learning and improving," offers encouragement while still feeling true. The goal is to build credibility with ourselves over time so that our empowering self-talk is grounded in both hope and evidence. Each time we follow through on a commitment, overcome a difficulty, or make progress toward a goal, we strengthen that credibility, making our inner voice more trustworthy and effective. It also helps to use self-talk in a way that is specific and actionable. Generic positivity can fade quickly, but targeted encouragement has lasting impact. Telling ourselves, "You handled that conversation well," or "You stayed calm under pressure," reinforces particular strengths, making it easier to draw on them in the future. By highlighting these successes in our inner dialogue, we train our minds to recognize patterns of competence rather than patterns of failure. Another aspect of empowering self-talk is using it proactively, not just reactively. Instead of waiting for a crisis to arise, we can make it a daily practice to speak to ourselves in ways that reinforce resilience. This might include starting the day with intentional statements like, "Whatever challenges come today, I will meet them with patience and strength," or ending the day with, "I handled today's difficulties and I'm ready to rest and recover." Over time, these repeated affirmations build a mental habit of encouragement that automatically activates during moments of stress. The environment we place ourselves in can either support or undermine this process. Surrounding ourselves with people who speak to us in constructive, respectful ways makes it easier to mirror that tone in our self-talk. On the other hand, constant exposure to criticism, negativity, or cynicism can seep into our internal dialogue and undo the progress we've made. Resilience is strengthened when the external voices around us align with the empowering internal voice we are trying to cultivate. Journaling can be another effective way to build empowering self-talk. By writing down our thoughts, we can more easily identify which ones are helping us move forward and which ones are holding us back. This practice allows us to literally rewrite the narratives in our heads, replacing harmful phrases with constructive ones. Seeing the words in front of us makes them more concrete and helps reinforce the new language we want to adopt. Resilience also requires patience, and empowering self-talk helps us maintain that patience. It reminds us that progress is often slow, that setbacks are part of the process, and that our worth is not determined by the speed of our success. By speaking to ourselves as we would to a friend we care about, we give ourselves the grace to grow through challenges rather than collapsing under them. When difficulties arise, a resilient inner voice doesn't ignore the reality of the problem, but instead says, "Yes, this is hard, but you've faced hard things before and you can handle this too." This kind of self-talk talk becomes a steady anchor in the storms of life, allowing us to bend without breaking and to keep moving forward when giving up would be the easier choice, transforming pain into motivation and purpose begins with the decision to no longer let past wounds define the direction of life in a destructive way. Pain, whether caused by words, experiences, or losses, has the potential to paralyze or to propel, and the difference lies in how it is processed. For many, the instinct is to bury hurt deep down, pretending it never happened, but suppressed pain often finds a way to resurface, influencing decisions and limiting potential. Choosing to transform it means facing it head on, acknowledging the reality of the hurt, and then deciding to use it as fuel for growth rather than a weight that keeps us down. Pain becomes a powerful motivator when it is reframed as a lesson or catalyst. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" the question shifts to, "What can I create or change because of what happened?" This shift is not about denying the hurt, but about giving it a new purpose. The same pain that once brought feelings of defeat can be redirected into action, into building something better for oneself or for others. Many people who have made significant contributions to the world have done so because they refused to waste their suffering. They turned it into a driving force for change. Using pain as motivation often starts with identifying the core emotion or message buried within the hurt. If someone was told repeatedly that they would never succeed, that pain might ignite a determination to prove otherwise, not out of bitterness, but out of a desire to show what is truly possible. If someone experienced rejection, that experience can be transformed into a mission to help others feel seen, valued, and included. The deeper the wound, the greater the potential for it to become a wellspring of empathy, strength, and persistence. Pain can sharpen focus and determination in ways comfort cannot. Difficult moments strip away distractions, forcing a person to confront what really matters to them. When harnessed correctly, this clarity becomes a compass, guiding choices toward meaningful goals. Every setback then becomes part of a larger story, one in which pain is not the ending, but a turning point. The energy that might have been spent dwelling on the unfairness of life is instead invested in building something worthwhile, creating a sense of purpose that feels unshakable because it was born out of real struggle. One of the most powerful ways to transform pain into purpose is to share the lessons learned from it. Speaking openly about struggles and how they were overcome can inspire others who are walking through similar experiences. It takes courage to be vulnerable, but in doing so, pain becomes more than a personal burden. It becomes a source of connection and encouragement. This act of sharing can also deepen one's own healing, as it reframes the pain as something that now serves a higher good. Transformation also comes from setting goals that directly counteract the effects of the pain. If someone was belittled into believing they could not achieve, setting and reaching ambitious goals becomes both a personal victory and a way of reclaiming identity. If someone experienced abandonment, building strong, healthy relationships can be a way of proving to themselves that connection and trust are still possible. The key is to channel the energy of the hurt into actions that align with the person they want to become, rather than the person the pain tried to create. It's important to recognize that pain, when used correctly, can develop qualities such as resilience, patience, and empathy that might not have been as strong without the hardship. People who have suffered often have a unique depth of understanding, allowing them to support and lead others in a way that is deeply authentic. This authenticity can become a cornerstone of their purpose, enabling them to connect with others in ways that purely intellectual knowledge never could. Transforming pain into motivation does not mean it stops hurting. There may still be moments when memories resurface and emotions feel heavy, but the difference is in how those moments are handled. Instead of letting them drag the person backward, they become reminders of why they started moving forward in the first place. Pain becomes a reference point for growth, a way to measure how far one has come and how much stronger they have become because of the struggle. Small, consistent actions often play the biggest role in this transformation. Grand gestures are not always necessary. Sometimes the act of getting up each morning and taking one more step toward a goal is itself an act of defiance against the pain. Over time, these small victories add up, building a life that no longer revolves around the wound, but around the purpose that grew from it. The more progress is made, the more the narrative shifts from being a victim of circumstances to being the author of a new story. Purpose built from pain tends to be deeply personal and enduring. It is not based on trends, fleeting desires, or shallow goals, but on something that touches the very core of who a person is. Because of this, it has a staying power that can carry someone through future challenges. When the next difficulty arises, they already know they can survive and even grow through it because they have done it before. In this way, pain, once transformed, becomes not just a motivator, but a constant source of strength, shaping a life that stands as proof that hardship can be the soil from which the most powerful purpose grows